It's very, very important to know which program type you're on because those different programs have different rules. So if you're trying to figure out if a loved one can work, their eligibility, making sure that they are getting as much, that they're getting what they are entitled to, what they should be receiving, that first step is going to be to figure out what program type they're on. So it's two programs. So one is type 1, that's SSI, that's the Supplemental Security Income for the aged, blind, and disabled. And then the type 2 is all the rest of the alphabet soup. That's your SSDI, that's your RSDI, your CDB, and your DWB. So all those different types of benefits. So SSI, so the purpose of SSI is food and shelter. So this is a needs-based program similar to Medicaid. Eligibility, there's, the person must have limited income. There's a resource eligibility of $2,000 for a single person or $3,000 if it's a couple. A person must have a severe medical or mental health condition. They must be a U.S. citizen. They must file for any other benefits that they're eligible for. So when somebody does a Social Security application, they will file for SSDI as well as SSI. And then also the person is not working, or if they are working, they are not meeting the substantial gainful activity limit, which for 2021 is $1,310 a month for a single person. So for 2021, the maximum monthly benefit for SSI only is $794 for an individual. So that's the maximum that someone can receive. To remain eligible in redeterminations, you have to stay under that resource limit. There cannot be any medical improvement. The unearned income does not exceed $794 a month. The gross earned income does not exceed the state Medicaid threshold, and you have to remain a resident of the United States. For SSDI, it has those same eligibility requirements as SSI. The difference is the amount that's paid out. So instead of it being a needs-based program, SSDI is something that somebody is collecting. It's more of an entitlement. It's either that person put in that work history, those work quarters, or their spouse and or their parents. So that's how that amount is figured out. One thing that's also important to note is that somebody can receive a type 1 benefit and a type 2 benefit. So for example, if I were to receive SSDI off my parents' account, but I was only receiving $200, I would also be eligible to apply for SSI, and I could receive that $594 to bring me up to that SSI max. So sometimes you see some situations where people are receiving multiple checks or multiple benefits from Social Security, and that's kind of how those things work together. So with SSDI, there is no cap. And then working while SSDI, the process is much, much different. So that's where it's really important, if that's something that you or a loved one is interested in, to figure out which program you're on.
Robyn, before we move on to the next slide, we have a question in the chat about SSDI. What happens with SSDI if an adult child on SSI's parent that was receiving SSDI benefits passes away? It sounds like this kind of fits in with that slide as you're talking about SSDI.
Sure. So if an adult child is on, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. So this is the adult child is receiving SSI on their own account, and then the parent passes away. Is that the question? Yes. Okay. So what happens with that is when a parent passes away, well, so let me back up a little bit. If a parent is of retirement age themselves, a child, if they're an adult child with a disability, they can actually collect some SSDI off of a parent's record as soon as that parent is of retirement age, and they also start to collect their Social Security. So they can receive a portion of it. Once a parent passes away, Social Security will actually reconfigure the amount received. And what we typically see is then that child will receive a larger SSDI, because what happens with SSDI benefits is they actually get split. So if there's like multiple disabled children, or if there is a spouse that's collecting and then also a disabled child that's collecting, and then somebody passes away, they reconfigure those amounts. So typically, once a parent passes away, we see that a child's SSDI, they'll start receiving some. And then if they receive more on the parent benefit than their SSI max, the SSI could go away, and then they'll get SSDI, which will be a greater amount. So they're always going to get whatever is the most advantageous to them. It's kind of a give and a take. Does that answer that question? Okay.
Yes, it does.
Perfect. Okay. Move this chat box away. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, Jody.
I think I did, didn't I?
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Nope, that's okay. So then I want to touch base on the 3 other programs. So the 3 other programs that fall under that second category, these programs are not available to everyone, only the specified groups. So, you know, some of those were for divorced widowers. One of them is like a railroad social security benefit. So those are not available to everyone. So when applying for SSDI, when you do that application, Social Security should automatically put the person in the correct category to receive the benefits they are entitled to. That does not mean that they do. Sometimes they make mistakes. So it's just really, really important to ask those questions and just to make sure. And if you think that, you know, for instance, you have a spouse and you should be receiving those benefits, it does not hurt to ask. You know, I recently was working with an individual who for the last 10 to 12 years should have been receiving benefits in a different category, and they were not. And it was simple enough as calling up to Social Security and just asking them, what type of benefits do they receive? Because a lot of times people say, well, I receive Social Security, but don't necessarily know which type. So it's just very, very important to be aware, make a notation of it somewhere, have your SSA call with you, and, you know, allow them to make those notations. So again, here's how you can find out what you are receiving and what you may be eligible for. So I included, this is the phone number for the Paynesville SSA office. In Lake County, we only have one office here for the Social Security Administration. So that is that number. Another thing that I'm not going to go too deep into because, you know, if this applies to you and this is something you're interested in, you know, my contact information will be at the end of the slide. You can certainly, or at the end of the presentation, you can certainly reach out to me. But one thing that Social Security has is a benefits plan inquiry, and it just has all kinds of specific information about your benefits, what program you're on, and it is really, really helpful if you are thinking about working. And there's just a lot of really good information on there. So that's something that Social Security can provide to you. It is free of charge. You just have to call up there and request that, and they'll transfer you to the right person that does that. So one other thing I wanted to touch base about with talking about the different types of programs is something to note with Social Security is that, you know, when you call up there initially and you provide them their contact information, it's important to make sure that you get transferred to the right person. You know, make sure that you are providing the Social Security number for the person you're inquiring about, and that you are talking to somebody that knows about that benefit type. Because not everybody at Social Security knows about all of the different programs. So it's just very important, you know, they'll put you through to the right person that will be able to answer those questions. So the next part I wanted to talk about is, you know, what does it mean to be a representative payee? So a representative payee can be a singular person or an organization who's been appointed by Social Security to receive the benefits on behalf of the person. So this person has been deemed unable to directly manage their own benefits. This can be done either, you know, the person can voluntarily give up their rights and request a representative payee. This can also be done with a doctor's note, doctor recommendation. Can also be done with a court order. So that is, you know, kind of how that process gets started. So the main duties for a representative payee are to pay for the current and future needs of the beneficiary, properly save any benefits that aren't needed at that time, and then complete all of the reporting requirements as mandated by Social Security. The payee has to keep records of all expenses, all money going in and out. And if and when the Social Security Administration requests a report, the representative payee must provide an accounting of how they've used or saved all of those benefits. Here is, I went ahead and put on, just the process to apply and become a representative payee and to change representative payees. So first thing that you want to do is you want to call our local office here in Lake County and just let them know if you're applying for new or if you are changing. The minimum requirement of what you need to provide is a ID, just proving your identity and your Social Security number. And then if you're affiliated with an organization. Then there is a form, it's the SSA 11 form that needs to be filled out. And then the individual or guardian will typically need to give some type of permission or consent for changing the representative payee. Another thing that I have seen them request before, they don't always request it, is that if you're switching payees, that they will sometimes ask for verification from the old payee, especially if it's a situation where the old payee does not want to be the payee anymore. So just really making sure that all those communications are happening, all of those notices are going out, any authorizations that are needed. So then here I went a little bit deeper into the reporting responsibilities. I hear a lot of times that people become representative payee and then a year or 2 years down the road, they're not fully aware of the reporting responsibilities. There is a handbook on the Social Security website that says, what it means to be a representative payee, all of the reporting responsibilities and duties. And I just like to take a second to talk about this because it is very, very serious. And if you are not keeping those accurate records, if you are not, completing these reporting responsibilities, it can be very, very serious for the individual and for the person that is the representative payee. Another thing that is really important and I've seen recently is when somebody becomes a representative payee, sometimes they choose to just simply add a person to their existing bank account, their existing checking account, and that creates a lot of issues just trying to decipher the money, whose money is what, where is the money going, what is it being used for. It also creates an issue if, for some reason, which representative payees or let's say it's a father and a son sharing an account and the father passes away, well, that account gets frozen. So then there's no way to access those funds. So it's very, very important. If you become a payee, you can go to a bank with your letter from Social Security and you can open a payee account and just have that be for that one person. It really just makes everything easier for reporting and just keeping all of that stuff in order. So here I included just some additional resources. So my contact information is right there. If you guys have questions, when it comes to Social Security, everything is case by case. So, I wanted to throw out as much general information as I could, but it really is so specific person to person. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If you have an SSA or are already hooked up with an SSA, they can get in contact with me as well. You can reach out to them. And then I also just included some general links, the SSA.gov website. There's a ton of resources on there, OhioDB101.org, insurance.ohio.org, and then again, our Paynesville Social Security Administration field office contact information, their hours. I will say right now, it's a little strange because of COVID. They are not accepting anything in person. They're not doing face-to-face appointments. So it's just a little bit different, but still possible. So let's see. There's a question here. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions that came up, it says, when my son's sister moved out, I didn't report that. I was told I was supposed to. I was then told that he had been overpaid for that time and would have to pay it back. So that is one thing with not getting those reportings in as quickly as possible. So I obviously don't know all the details of this case, but one thing that, would maybe make sense to Social Security saying there was an overpayment is, for instance, if a person was living one place and their rent was $400 and then they moved somewhere else and their rent was only $200,
I mean, do you want me to fry more? Sorry.
I'm muted.
Unmute. So if somebody was on SSI, like I said, that's a needs-based program. So we will see a fluctuation depending on their expenses, so their food and their shelter. So if they moved somewhere where their shelter costs went down, their SSI would have gone down to reflect that as well. So if there was that lag in reporting time and they were paying based on a higher shelter cost, that's kind of one example of where you'd get into that overpayment situation. My disabled son turns 18 in January. When should we start applying for SSI? So you can actually start applying, you can start applying as soon as somebody is deemed disabled. You can do that application process. A lot of times what I will see is I will see people who, even with their 14-year-old, they go ahead and they apply for Social Security disability, even if they're living at home with mom and dad. A lot of times then what you'll see is they'll come back through the process. They'll say, yes, this person is disabled. However, right now they're living under mom and dad. We don't dictate that they have any food or shelter costs. So, yes, they have SSDI, but their monthly amount is $0. So you can definitely do those applications as soon as possible. And then it makes it even easier. So then, if your son were to move out and you were planning for that for future food and shelter costs, it would just be a simple adjustment of expenses opposed to the whole application process, which can be quite lengthy. So I would recommend applying as soon as possible.
Any other questions that we did not attend to? All right, Robyn, thank you so much. We appreciate that presentation. I am recording this Zoom meeting, although I did unfortunately forgot to do it until we got into the first slide, but I did remember. So this will get posted on our website so that if you decide you have questions, or you want to hear part of that again, or see that presentation, you'll be able to see it on our website, hopefully by the end of the week, okay? All right, Ann, you are up next. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again for your presentation on Medicaid.
Thank you. So my name is Ann Curwen, and I work at the Lake County Department of Job and Family Services. I've been there about 15 years, and the last 10 or so has been in long-term care Medicaid department. So my employees are ones that you have probably seen the names of, either Jen Somrak or Denise Rupno, Amy Avancic, Jessica Paul. They're all they're the supervisor and then the caseworkers within the waiver unit. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So for Medicaid recipients, any Medicaid recipient in the state of Ohio is required to review their process and review their case once every 12 months. And that does include any waiver recipients. So any Medicaid recipient, we touch those cases at least once a year, sometimes more often if things are happening in between those certifications. And so in between those certifications, any changes are required to be reported to the Department of Job and Family Services. So that could mean changes in income, changes in assets, change of address, change of living arrangement, or marital status. So if anything changes during that 12-month period, if you're the authorized representative or the client's able to contact us, then we do require that they contact.
I tried to ask a question, but it didn't let me.
Oh, Diane, is that you?
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Now, I'm sorry, you know, I had a question about the Social Security, but I will go back and send it directly to her. It wasn't so much with Job and Family Services, but since you are, since I'm live, I guess I should ask the question. If you're reporting work status to Social Security, is it also necessary to report to Job and Family Services, or does that information get shared?
Yes, yes, yes. Both places need to know.
Right.
Social Security
But yes,
is
it gets shared. No, I like that one the best.
no, it does not get shared.
Darn.
Yes, you're required to report to both places. So Social Security Administration is a federal agency. The Department of Job and Family Services are state run. They don't share and communicate. So anything, and I know a lot of people have that misconception that, you know, oh, I let Social Security know, or I let somebody else know. And unfortunately, you do have to report to both places to let, you know, to advise of any changes, or else we won't know about that.
So
sorry.
if you are reporting work hours, say, for example, the scenario would be a job was obtained and now someone is receiving dollars based on that job, even if it's part-time or very minimal. It needs to be reported to both in the event that benefits from either or various programs need to be recalculated.
Correct. Yes.
And is it easy, just since everything's closed right now due to COVID, is it best to fax it in? Should you contact somebody first to make them aware of this?
For Job and Family Services, there's still a lot of ways you can get us information. If you prefer to fax it, you definitely can fax it. And this contact information will all be at the end of the slide and you'll be able to see all of this, but you can either fax. We do have an email address. You can even email changes into us.
Okay.
Even though our building is closed, our lobby still has a Dropbox. So if you prefer to make sure it actually is physically at the building, you can do the Dropbox. You can also call and report the change. So every waiver recipient has a caseworker, and you can call them, or you can call our customer service line and report that change.
So how would you know who your caseworker is?
If you aren't sure, you can give us a call and we can look up that information and give you their direct phone number. All of our long-term care and waiver recipients do have direct caseworkers with direct phone lines. So you can call them directly, get their voicemail, or get them if they're in the office and speak to them.
So is it most appropriate if you wanted to find out more about some of the waiver programs or other programs in general to find out, number one, who your caseworker is, and then just contact them for that information?
Correct. And
Okay.
if it's a new individual and they don't have a caseworker yet, or you're just not sure, we do have a general customer service number, and you can just call that line and they'll put you to who you need to talk to. Yep.
Yeah, they're very helpful. I've called them before, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Diane, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again so that we don't have a feedback.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we can go to the next slide.
I have no idea how the red X got on the screen. I didn't do it, I swear. It's there. I don't know how it got there.
No problem. So every year when Medicaid or waiver services are renewed, our eligibility system will attempt to auto renew benefits. So that's kind of like a hands-off, no-touch process where the client's information will go through our system and be matched against different databases and try to just electronically recertify that person for 12 months. The overwhelming majority of cases fall out of that process, either for one reason or another. So there's very few cases that go through that auto renewal process and are successful. Most of the time what happens is if it falls out, then you will get a renewal packet in the mail. So anytime that renewal isn't successful, you'll get the packet in the mail. It'll say to renew your Medicaid benefits, complete this packet and return it. There is a return envelope with that renewal, and it's our state Columbus address. You can send it to that address and then they forward those to the counties. If you're more comfortable dropping that off or emailing it or faxing it directly to the Lake County office, you can do that. And then once we get that renewal back, then we begin to process that. So they are time sensitive. So when you get that renewal packet, you really want to act on it within the specified time frame, which I think it says 15 days on there. So anytime that packet, you get it, you send it in. If you need to confirm that we received it, you fax in, you weren't sure it went through, you can always call the customer service line and we can check that and just make sure that the information has made it to us physically, because a couple months ago we had huge problem. Well, we, not JFS, but the USPS had major mail delays, and so if you just need that peace of mind to make sure we got something, feel free to give us a call and double check that. So this slide just shows the the process of how that goes. So the packet must be completed and returned. It says within 10 days. And then any one of those methods. And then once we do receive it, the caseworker will begin processing that to see if there's any information that we can gather electronically, or if we need to request information from the client themselves. So typically what we're looking at in a renewal is, what is the income source? What's the income amount? Has it changed from what was previously known? And if it's something like Social Security benefits, the majority of the time we can electronically verify that through our databases. So we have an interface with Social Security. We should be able to bring up the individual's 2021 gross monthly benefit and use that without having to ask the client for that information. If for some reason it's income that we aren't able to verify, or they're working and we need the most recent pay stubs, then we do send out a request to the individual and their authorized representative, giving them 10 days and then a follow-up with an additional 10 days requesting that information. When that request is received by the individual or the authorized rep, if there's any questions about, what are they really asking for, or, I'm not sure what I can provide for that particular request, you can always call the case worker's contact phone number is always on that letter that you receive. And if you need more time to get anything in, or you need assistance in getting something, always reach out. Okay, so if we don't get the actual packet back, so it didn't go through that no-touch process, an actual packet was sent and we never get the packet back, then benefits are discontinued. So even if the individual's on waiver services and they get this packet and they think it's for Medicaid, I don't have Medicaid, it is waiver is a Medicaid program, and we still do need that packet back. So it's important to get that information into us as soon as you can. There is a 90-day reinstatement period if you fail to provide documents. So if we request something and it doesn't come back, we do have that 90 days in which you have to return it, and we can still act on that information. If there's ever any action that we take on a case that you disagree with, we always provide in the mailings the right to a state hearing. That hearing process is basically a state hearing officer who will hold a hearing, review the information, see if the county acted correctly, and make a decision. So you always have that 90 days to appeal any decisions that are taken on the case. This comes up often. So Robyn in her presentation mentioned SSA rep payees. So rep payees don't automatically mean authorized representative for Job and Family Services. A lot of people think, oh, I'm the rep payee for SSA benefits, then I can call JFS or I can act on their behalf and I can get information. And unfortunately, like I said, those are two different federal and state programs, so they don't communicate. So for Job and Family Services, the Ohio Department of Medicaid is very particular in what they will and will not allow for someone to be a representative on a family member or friend's case. It's basically, we need something in writing. If the individual can sign, it would be a signed statement or a signed authorization for someone else to represent them. If they have a guardian, that's sufficient as well. So either guardianship documents or an authorized representative form signed by the client. The sticky part of that is power of attorney. So I just wanted to touch on this because this also, we see this a lot. So a power of attorney can act as a representative if the power of attorney paperwork specifically states that they have the ability to apply for public benefits. So just keep that in mind if you're a power of attorney, or if you're working with a family member that is a power of attorney, it does need to state that. And if it doesn't, we would need a client signature to be able to designate someone as an authorized representative. An authorized representative or a third party can always provide us information, but we are only allowed to release information to a designated authorized representative or the client. So this just goes over the responsibilities of the individual or the authorized representative. So as I mentioned, that annual redetermination packet has to be completed. They're required to report any changes to us. And then this just goes over the list of changes that are required to be reported. So address change, if we can't reach you and we make attempts and we don't have anything on file and there's no forwarding address on the mail that comes back to us, these are things that can close benefits. So you want to make sure if someone moves, you report the address change. If someone gets married, divorced, anything like that, if someone moves in with somebody else, we always need to know about those changes because those can affect what benefits people are receiving. Any start or stop of employment, pregnancy status, third-party responsibility for healthcare costs. If someone gets another insurance, Medicaid is always the payer of last resort. So we need to know if someone else is responsible also for paying for someone's healthcare costs. Any change to assets that exceed $2,000, so whatever they have in their bank accounts and assets, we do need to know if that changes and that goes above $2,000, which is the limit. And then if there's a change in a guardian or authorized rep, we would also need to know that. That happens pretty frequently. If there's a change of guardian, we don't always know about that until someone's, all of a sudden in a rush trying to get information from us and we don't have any paperwork showing that this person is the new guardian. So, we will try to verify that through the court website if we can, but a lot of the times, if that hasn't been updated, we don't have the most up-to-date information. So just keep us posted if there are any changes like those. Okay, is there anything on the next slide? So when someone's approved for Medicaid, they do get a permanent paper card now. They typically do not receive another card unless they are enrolled on a managed care plan, then they get the actual plastic card. The cards contain the information that the providers need to bill. But even if for some reason you misplaced the card and had to go to see a provider, they should be able to pull your information with your Medicaid billing number or Social Security number. But if it's a matter of getting a duplicate of a card, you can contact the managed care plan directly, or if it's a Medicaid card, Job and Family Services. And then this is just a reminder that DODD waivers are Medicaid services. So an individual who uses their DODD waiver to receive services has to maintain their status with Medicaid in order to not experience any disruption in services or closures or any negative effects to their benefits.
So I'm going to hop in real quick, Ann. So what we see sometimes with our providers is they'll start seeing those packets coming in the mail for their individuals, and they'll in the plan, they'll be responsible for upkeeping benefits, and they're looking at these packets going, well, why are we getting Medicaid packets? We don't get Medicaid. We have an IO waiver. We have a level 1 waiver. DODD waivers are Medicaid services. So in order to continue to receive your DODD waiver, or for the individual to continue to receive DODD services through that waiver, Medicaid eligibility needs to be continued.
Yes.
So I just like to point that out. And then as far as our providers go, I know there's a couple providers on this call. You do have access to MITS, which is the Medicaid Information Technology System. So you are able to get in there and see the eligibility dates for the individuals that you serve. So if you're thinking, I haven't seen an eligibility packet in an awfully long time, and I know it's something I'm responsible for, you do have the ability to go check that portal. If you have questions about that, I think all the provider names I saw on here, I believe you already have my contact information. And I can put it in the chat box as well. If anyone has questions about that as a provider, that you can reach out to me and I can help you get that access.
Yep. So Medicaid, there weren't many questions on Robyn's presentation, so I was thinking there would be a lot of questions now, but if there aren't.
We have a few. I just want to let you give your.
Okay. If you think of a question later, or something comes up, the customer service hotline is the 350-4011. So our caseworkers actually manage that customer service line. It is open from 8 to 4:15. It's closed from noon to 1 at lunchtime. And that customer service line, the caseworkers that answer those calls are Medicaid trained, they're SNAP trained, cash assistants, but they don't necessarily do long-term care. So as I mentioned before, there are specific caseworkers that do long-term care, but if you have a quick question about something being received, or you just needed, something that wasn't too in-depth into, case-specific questions about long-term care, you can call that customer service hotline. If you don't know who the caseworker is, you can call that hotline to find out. If your questions are pretty specific to waiver services, then the contact for that is the caseworker themselves, and they do have a direct line. One of them is working in the office. The other ones are still working from home. So if you have to leave a voicemail, they will check those and get back to you. If you need to submit any documents or applications, you can email those to us, and that LakeJFS_documents email box is the best way to do that. And those get sent to a caseworker within a day or two, and your documents will be there. And best practice is to put your case number on it, or social security number if you're comfortable with that. Some identifying information, because even if your name is not that common, it's matching them against our database of all of Ohio. So you want to be as specific as you can on any documents you're turning in to us. And if you just have a question, you can email us at that LakeJFS_inquiries email. I am actually the one who usually checks that email box and sends responses. There are other staff members that do that as well, but you can ask case-specific questions in that email box. Anything that's, you need us to check, we can get you an answer via the email box. And then, like I said before, our building is closed, but you can still submit applications and documents in our Dropbox in our lobby. And then we get a lot of questions on Medicaid services or managed care plans. And if you have specific questions, like does Medicaid cover an eye exam or dentures or different equipment, the best thing to do is to either call the Medicaid consumer hotline if it's a straight Medicaid recipient. If it's the individual is on a managed care plan, contacting that managed care plan directly is the best way to go to find out about services. So our agency handles all eligibility and all financials, but we don't know all the ins and outs of all the things the Medicaid provides and doesn't provide. So I hope that helps.
All right, and we have a couple questions from the chat box. The first one, can you talk about whether or not a Medicaid recipient should or should not be claimed as a dependent on taxes?
For a waiver recipient, we ask those questions because those are general Medicaid questions. So when someone applies for Medicaid, there's a whole slew of information that we're asking for. And one of them is, how do you claim, are you claimed as someone's dependent, or how do you file taxes? And what those questions allow us to do is to figure out what Medicaid program you could be eligible for. So we don't really, our agency doesn't advise someone how to file their taxes and how to do things. For a waiver individual, I will say that only their income and only their assets are taken into account for eligibility purposes. If they are married, there are some implications that go beyond their own information. But the majority of the time, only the applicant's income and assets will count for Medicaid eligibility. So I hope that answers the question. I can't really expand any on any tax implications, but for Medicaid, there are some ramifications to how people are claimed on taxes when it comes to Medicaid outside of the waiver and long-term care services.
And the next question we have is, why would an individual on Medicaid also be put on Medicare? And what about an individual on Medicaid and then that person turns 65?
Okay, good question. So Medicaid, like I said before, is always the payer of last resort, and Medicaid is needs-based. Medicare is administered through the Social Security Administration, and it's an entitlement program. People receive Medicare 2 years after they become disabled, or they receive Medicare once they reach retirement age. So you can have Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid is the secondary payer in that situation. So if someone has Medicare and they apply for Medicaid, the first thing we look at is how old they are and what their Social Security benefits are. In the second part of that question, can you repeat the second part? I know that was, why would they? And then
what about an individual on Medicaid that turns 65?
Okay. So when someone turns 65, there are different Medicaid programs that we look at. So I don't know if I want to expand, if I can expand too much on community Medicaid outside of the waiver program, but when someone turns 65, there's different income guidelines, there's different asset requirements. So, if the person who asked that has a specific question, I'll give my contact information at the end. If they want to contact me directly, I can look at specifics. But there are different age requirements. When you're a different age, there are different requirements for the program.
Just to piggyback a little bit off of Ann and discussing Medicare. So one thing that I hear a lot is when somebody's loved one is on Medicaid, they're already getting their Medicaid waiver, and they receive a notice from Social Security stating you're now entitled for Medicare. We're going to start taking X number of dollars a month out of your benefit for your Medicare premium. And the first instinct is to call Social Security and to cancel Medicare. Something I just want to put out there is that Medicare does, if you waive your right once you become Medicare eligible, there is a penalty, 10% of the premium for every full 12 months that you decline your Medicare services. So if you ever think you might want to take Medicare in the future, it's a good idea to kind of talk through that to see if that's the right choice for you or not. There is a program through Job and Family Services where, in essence, Medicaid pays that Medicare premium, and there are separate eligibility requirements for that. And so, somebody at JFS can, talk you through that, or if you have an SSA with the county, meet with them. They can assist you in calling that JFS caseworker. But that is one thing that, we see a lot. People waiving that, and then in the long run, it affecting them negatively.
Yes, and I will just add to that every waiver recipient gets their Medicare premium paid. So even if they aren't eligible for those separate programs that pay for Medicare premiums and copays and stuff like that, every waiver recipient will have their Part B premium paid. So, and as I said before, anyone who files an application, we explore every Medicaid program they could be eligible for. So we look at all of those things. If they have Medicare, we're always taking that in mind when we're processing the application, whether or not they would be eligible for a program like that.
Are there any other questions for Ann? Ann, can you put your email right in the chat box for everybody?
Yeah, I'm actually going to, probably the best way to get a hold of me is that inquiries mailbox. So I'll type that one in there again. Like I said, I'm usually the one that responds to that anyway. So if there's any question that you have about any case specific questions or not, you can always direct them to that email box.
All right, so I have to apologize for the red X through part of Ann's presentation. Apparently, little did I know, on the menu bar on my screen, there's an annotate button, and who knew that that meant a red pen? And I'm not sure how I hit it or why I hit it. So it took me a little time to get it back off. So I do apologize for that. There was no X put through information that, you know, the information's good. So just ignore the X. Sorry about that. All right. And I guess if there are, thanks, Jill. I appreciate the support there. If there are no other questions, then everybody have a great night. Please let me know if you enjoyed the session, if you liked having.
We did just have a question pop up, Jody.
All right.
We did just have a question pop up.
Okay.
So this question is from a parent/guardian of their daughter. The question is, when I retire, does my daughter on Medicaid become Medicare eligible?
So I'll go ahead and speak to that about the Medicare specific piece. So the short answer is no. So your daughter's Medicare eligibility is not tied to anybody else's Social Security status, retirement status, anything like that. She would become Medicare eligible if she was receiving a Social Security benefit for 2 years for 24 months, and or once she hits that retirement age. So those two things are not correlated.
All right.
Robyn?
Any other questions before we, whoops, and 2 dots after JFS? I think it's just supposed to be 1 dot.
Sorry, it is 1 dot. I'm typing in this small laptop, so I apologize. It is 1 dot.
All right. Like I said, let me know if you guys enjoy this kind of venue for the family forums. We certainly got a lot more people that were able to take advantage of it, so that's kind of good. So we'll continue using Zoom in one fashion or another, even if that's in a hybrid when the restrictions are removed and we're allowed to do some in-person. So we will definitely continue to use a virtual platform as well, just because it really does allow people to be able to access from their home and they don't have to be running around. And, you know, I think it reaches more people than we've been able to reach. So there's the silver lining from COVID, right? So, okay, everybody, I do appreciate you attending tonight. Everybody take care, stay safe. And our next family forum is scheduled for May 12th. You'll be seeing information out on that soon. And that is going to be for estate planning and stable accounts. So we'll have representatives from Hickman and Louder to talk about estate planning, and from the state of Ohio Treasurer's Office to talk about stable accounts. So that'll be another good one for you to join us. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.